All right. Oh, all right. So, mm, very much welcome to Skogen and to this evening, activating public space. This evening is a collaboration with between Skogen and Statens konstråd and ICIA and creative time. Yeah. Very briefly, the evening will be now about 1 hour, presentations, a little bit more maybe. Then there will be dinner for 45 minutes, an hour. And since we're now this many people, I think we have to kind of take small portions. Yeah, think of it as time. That's good. And then after the dinner at 8, there is like a conversation. Yeah. So that's it. Feels a bit like 70s here. That's good. So, before we start, I was asked to give a brief presentation of Skogen, where we are. Basically, Skogen is a platform. Skogen means forest. If you, and it's a platform, and it's been here for 3 years. And what we do, or the idea that we had when we started Skogen, was to try to see if we could find other relations, to kind of build other relations between artists and us as producers or platform, and also other relations between artists and the audience. And the format that we tried since then is to do this kind of thematic blocks where we invite artists and then we collaborate with them to do some kind of a research program and a public program. And the idea is basically that there is like this artistic research that kind of drives the situation, but it's also a public program, and it's also a way to kind of engage with the research that goes on and to kind of activate the public, maybe. Maybe also to think, I mean, what happens, I think, we talked about this also yesterday actually here. If we think of art as just display, or performing art as just performances or products, then also the audience kind of become the customer. So I think it's a little bit to rethink and to think how we can do things together. And how art can be used as this kind of platform to do things together and to work together, basically. So also maybe coming to watch something is a way of working. Yeah, so we do these blocks. We've done, I think, 18 of these blocks. And the next one actually starts on Wednesday already. And there are some programs around, you can find them. The next block is called 3 White Soldiers, and it's about looking into contemporary finance and shamanistic practices. And I think there is a link, maybe. That's a little bit our idea to think of this. Or to think of, there is this concept in contemporary finance called high-frequency trading, and it's basically a kind of time-space that's no longer accessible to humans because it's so fast. So it's thinking of this kind of journeys in time-spaces beyond the human capacity. That's the next block, and you're very, very welcome to come back in the next month. I think that's what I'm going to say right now. So I leave the stage to you and to Lisa Rosendahl from Statens konstråd.
Thank you. And thank you once again to Skogen and to ICIA and to Creative Time for collaborating with us, the public art agency, Statens konstråd, in making this evening happen. So my name is Lisa Rosendahl and I work as a curator at the public art agency. The public art agency, it was founded in 1937, so it has a long history of being an interface between art and society. We do this in various ways. There's a collection of over 100,000 works that is installed in public buildings around the country. There's also, we do permanent commissions in public buildings. And I will actually play you some images that show, I will not talk about any of them, but just to give you a kind of visual background. If this works, you will see a flow of artworks that we have previously produced. Since Magdalena Malm took over as director about 2 years ago, we are moving into a slightly different direction. We keep on doing the collection and the permanent commissions, but we are now also focusing on producing temporary commissions in public space, as well as involving artists in the early stages of city planning. And we work nationally. There are currently also several projects being planned here for Gothenburg. There's a permanent commission at the Humanities Department of the university, for example, and there's also a collaboration with Trafikverket, the Swedish Transport Administration, who will complete a major change in the infrastructure here in Gothenburg over the next few years, and we will be collaborating with them. As well as hopefully staging temporary commissions in the city. So why is it interesting to work with temporary commissions? What possibilities are offered by temporary commissions in opposition to permanent works? I think for us temporary commissions are not about placemaking, but rather about creating spaces for debate and for reflection and of course for action. It's not a way to comply in any way with the logic of the fast-paced attention economy or the event-driven society, but rather a possibility to react faster to changes in society and to be able to address them in a variety of different ways. And also, we should also remember that this word temporary, of course, it doesn't mean only things that might happen once. It can be also processes that happen over several years. So Magdalena Malm, the director, she initiated the collaboration with Creative Time to do the Creative Time Summit in Stockholm, exactly to make visible this broad spectrum of public practice that is emanating from the art field today. And the summit just happened. It was a 2-day conference held at Kulturhuset in Stockholm this past weekend. It was co-curated by Creative Time's chief curator, Nathan Thompson, who is sitting here next to me, and Magdalena Malm. And with over 40 international speakers representing vastly different ways of working with public art practice, and 500 attendees in the audience, it was quite a unique event, I might say, not only for Stockholm and Sweden, but actually for Europe. And this evening, the idea is that we will continue the discussion that we started off in Stockholm with NATO, with artist Tanja Bruguera, sitting next to NATO, with Anna van der Vliet from the Institute of Contemporary Ideas and Art, and with Carl-Oskar Sjögren, jag såg att, and Haroon Nathan, and the non-existent center. Alexandra, who's joined us at this very last minute, so we didn't meet before.
En del av the non-existent center, men nu är jag här för att
she's going to translate if we need to. And the idea is that each presenter will give a short presentation. And we ask you to save your questions, because we will have a break with some food, as was previously announced. And then we reconvene after about 45 minutes, and we have a concluding discussion. In the break, I should say also, we will host a release of a new publication. This that has been produced by a group of students at Valand, and artist Sara Jordana will introduce the book before we go off on our break. And the concluding discussion will start from two broad questions, and then it can wander off in whatever direction we all choose to take it. But these two questions are basically, what spaces can art create for social and political change? What is specific about, what does art have to offer social and political issues and engagement? And the other question is, what are the conditions that govern these spaces? And I think it's very interesting to discuss, because we all represent different positions. I work for a governmental agency. Anna and NATO, of course, run independent organizations that are funded from a variety of sources. And the Non-Existent Center and Tanya represent the artistic positions. So I would like to hand over to NATO from Creative Time.
Cool. Glad to be here. I don't even know where I am. Let's put that out there.
That was not...
I used to live in a warehouse, so we'd have noise. Uh-oh, okay. Hey, I got a question about this room, too. I keep... Is that me? Okay, is that check? 1, 2... All right. Hey, is there a capacity issue, or is it possible for the shorter people of the world to sit down here? Just because there's so many folks. Is that possible? Just because there's room right here. I don't want to throw things off. Does anybody want to come up front? Or just, I don't know. Am I throwing things off with that? Just saw this room. Just want to share the love. Gotta share the love. Okay, yeah, just... Okay. Yeah. Get on in. I couldn't stand at that door that long. Okay. So Creative Time. Listen, I'm really glad to be here, and it's interesting because the question of public art, ultimately, it has a history of having a spatial dimension, but I think ultimately it's a political dimension at heart, which is, what is a public? What I love is it kind of forces a question on art, which is entertaining, because it forces the not public art to be private art. So if you're not public art, that's a very different kind of art. And so in some ways, I think public art really makes a claim for the intentions of aesthetics in the political sphere, which is basically life. It's actually art taking itself seriously. So in some ways, the category of public art is basically art taking itself seriously. That said, I wanted to kind of briefly talk about what Creative Time does, and then I'll kind of contextualize that within a few projects. Creative Time is an organization that's been around for 42 years. We produce, we commission artists to do projects. We actually produce with them. We're not a granting organization, but instead we work with artists to produce dreams in public. I've been with the organization for 8 years, and because we work like that, we do not have a certain defined politics per se. It's a little schizophrenic, because certainly at times we work with artists whose projects are very open-ended. For example, one sec. And what I mean by open-ended is more things that are kind of politically in. That's funny. There's Maria Lynn right there. Okay. So, for example, we worked with, not so long ago, the artist Nick Cave in Grand Central Station, a project called Herd. And it was these dancing horses dancing through the city and these choreographed dances. but not stuff you'd consider as like overtly political, only in the sense that like the kind of unleashing the poetic and the imaginary in public space has a politics. Get what I'm saying? But simultaneously, we've done what you might consider more overtly political projects. I'm not going to talk about the project we did with Tanya, because Tanya's right next to me and she can mention it. You're going to talk about it, right? To some degree, of course. But in, for example, 2009... Oh, I talked about this at the summit. Did any of you watch the summit?
Yeah.
Some of you? Okay, so... Oh, what are you? Oh, it's all right. I was coming. Anyways, this is a project of the artist Jeremy Deller, where we took a car that had been blown up in a bombing in Baghdad during the Iraq War on a tour of the United States, and had an Iraqi U.S. soldier, an Iraq War U.S. soldier, and an Iraqi citizen translator travel with the car and have conversations with America about what they'd experienced. So it was kind of a traveling project that went to 16 different cities in America. We also, in 2007, worked with the artist Paul Chan to produce a project in the hurricane-ravaged neighborhood of New Orleans called the Lower Ninth Ward, to produce a reproduction of the play Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. And that was a two-part project, which was a series of community organizing that worked to actually, under the kind of auspices of thinking through what Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot meant for the community. And that project, which is actually when I first got to Creative Time, really informs a lot of the way we work, and that is, Paul elegantly said, this project has a front end and the back end. The front end being the production of a play, and the back end being the production of a public. And in that simple statement informs a lot of the practice we're involved in, which is to say, the production of a play I think of as a code for aesthetics must position itself within within a reading and organizing of the politics and belonging of community. So, and the politics of public space need to be encountered in that. And I think that kind of way of working, not to get into the politics of it, but he actually kind of jokingly said we're organizing this project like Hezbollah. But that is to say we're going to knock on doors. I mean, you could also say we're organizing this project like the Black Panthers. We're organizing this project like Mao Zedong. We're organizing this project like Saul Alinsky, or a whole history of people that understood that to produce a politics, you need to go one person at a time, talking to them, listening to them, and having your politics informed by them. And over the years, increasingly I find artists much more interested in developing a kind of cultural production that informs itself through one-on-one conversations in an aggregate of community meaning making. And those strategies, strangely enough, or wonderfully enough, have a long history. Crap. This is going to drive me crazy. Have a long history in political activism. And what we're finding increasingly, and what's the summit kind of emerged from, and I'll talk about the summit too, which is, this is the 6th Creative Time Summit, and the summit emerged from the fact that the methodologies at work in politics or activism are not actually that dissimilar from a lot of artistic practice we're seeing emerge around the world. And that simultaneity of methodologies is fascinating. At the summit, we had 3 politicians who presented as moderators or presenters, as well as artists. And what I thought was fascinating was that the way, the concerns and methods of speaking and thinking through the world were not that different languages. That there was a shared set of concerns and political discourse. We had an artist named Jonas Stahl present a project called New World Summit, where he hosts a summit of political organizations that, for whatever reason, their country deems excluded from the political process in their country. So whether it is separatist movements, what are considered terrorist movements, what are considered violent revolutionary movements, what are considered movements by groups, for whatever reason, are outside of what is the political process in a country. He's been producing a summit for those people to come together, which is a radical project. But what he said to me that I think really stuck with me, as well as one of the parliamentarians from Iceland, who was awesome. Brigitte, she was incredible, and she said, they both said, what we're doing today is constructing a politics of the future. We are constructing the language, the political language of what it means to contend with our global realities. And that is an extraordinarily shocking, exciting way to think through the diverse methodologies and global positions that each one of these artists is coming to the table with. And I'm watching it happen every year. It more and more profoundly sticks with me how this is working. Okay, so one other thing. So Creative Time actually produces projects. We do 1 or 2 a year, work on those. We have the Summit, which we do once a year, which is a gathering of artists and increasingly activists, politicians, anti-authoritarians, communists, insane people, deeply serious, pragmatic people. You know, the world. Yeah, anarchists, people that hate anarchists, anarchists that hate anarchists, whatever. You know, the gamut of art activism and such. To come together to kind of share their kind of strategies. It's a really strategy sharing space. But we also have another platform that I just want to briefly introduce too. Will you tell me when I'm over time? Because I hate running over time. And I know we got a lot of people, so I want to make sure I give everyone time. Yeah, I'm very into time management. We have a project called Creative Time Reports as well, which is, and you should look it up online. Well, you can see it. I'm online. I'm on the internet. Sorry, I won't take up my time looking at that. Projects. Oh God, where are you? Oh, there it is. Boom. So this website, I know, believe me, nothing I hate more than a project that says, this website. But this is a project where we actually work with artists to produce news. And that is to say, it's more geared towards the artist as journalist style of working. And we're open to suggestions, just to say, please, if you have ideas, please submit them to us, because we really are looking for global reportage. But what's important about this is not just that it's a website, but what I think is fascinating is, we had a meeting where we sat down with news outlets and art magazines and pitched this idea. Would it be interesting to you to have artists report on the news of the day? Because in my personal experience, when you talk to artists, friends, people who have a kind of more radical sense of what the political can be, their conversations, your friends' conversations, are probably way more interesting than anything you hear on the news. So why is the news so uninteresting and your conversation so much more interesting? What's with the gap? So we were really interested in having a conversation with people that believed in things like internationalism, who were very ambivalent about patriotism, who were really comfortable talking about LGBTQ rights, right? That there was a kind of demonstrative politics, that things that we take as a given, that in the news sphere is radical, and in our sphere is obvious. So we want to demonstrate a kind of politics of that. So we talked to these, and we had like BBC at the table, Al Jazeera, Guardian, Art Forum, Flash Art. It was kind of a funny mix. The Nation, Foreign Policy Review. So we pitched this idea, and a lot of the art magazines were like, I don't know about that. But all the news outlets stuck around. And since then, a lot of these news outlets have taken and co-produced these projects with us. So now we have a permanent partnership with The Guardian, where we are content producers. We make the content on our dime. We pay the artists always. But we pay for the content, we produce it. So, you know, the art, this subject matter is actually reaching millions and millions and millions of people. The readership of The Guardian is a lot bigger than the art world. Just going to tell you, if you didn't know that. And we've had 3 of our stories actually in the top 10 of their most read stories. We've had partnership. We have a permanent partnership now developing with Al Jazeera. BBC's interested. So just to say, the arts often relegates it to this small little sphere of doing weird gallery shows. But the content being produced should be operating on a broad, global, civic media outlet level. Because we're the content producers. Make sense? Everyone wants content, and the artists are still like struggling to get gallery shows. So something's mixed up.
2 more minutes.
Yeah, sure. So, what's also important to bear in mind about Creative Time Reports is that it's thinking about the ways in which artists can participate in broad civic culture, which I think of as public art. So this isn't a spatial project, but it is a project of participating in the construction of a global public with subjective voices from around the world. And so this kind of opportunity to think of our role at Creative Time as a way to produce platforms, to put artists in conversations with the historic important questions of our time, with those who are making those decisions, and both challenging them but also learning from it, that's the direction I want to go. I'm tired of living in the corners. You know, and I think the art world, let's face it, most of us are in this because we were losers in junior high school, and we got beat up a lot, or we were like weird or gay, or we just hated the world and they hated us. It's like, No. You were like cool in high school, junior high school. Yeah. Well, some of us, I won't speak for everyone. Some of you were cool. I was a loser. So I got into the arts because I was like, that's where the losers went to. And so, but I just mean to say we're kind of used to hiding as a part of our culture. And it is a real, like, the avant-garde tradition is always throwing stones at the man, but it really loves its little small group that hates everybody. It's in our traditions, typically, internationally. And it's a bad tradition, I'm going to say. It's a bad, destructive, unproductive, cliquish, elitist, often problematic thing that we typically do in our culture. So I'm all for finding ways that we can actually participate in the important decisions of our time. Artists are tired of being in the corner too. Not to mention we have real political issues internationally that we should be addressing. And that means compromise. That means dealing with the complexities of actually dealing with power as opposed to utopia. Although utopia is awesome too. Don't get me wrong. Always utopia. But I think that this kind of political concerns is not just me. I mean, this is in the water. This is out there, and it's not stopping. And I'm going to be more excited. Thanks.
Nato. We move over to Tanya Bruguera. Art is based between Cuba and the US. Who was also part of the summit. And it will be in Sweden.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm going to talk about a project that is extremely complicated, so I'm going to focus on the structural level of the project and a very pragmatic view of the project, so it's going to be a little dry. In 2005 I was in Paris and I saw this the outskirts of immigrant descent in the banlieue and the reaction of the police to that, and I was there in the place where the news were being generated, which is not always what happens. Usually you hear something happening somewhere else, but in this case I was in the place, so I was seeing what's happening in the street and then going to the TV at night and not matching those two realities. And that made me think about the situation in which immigrants are politically, in which they are stripped of the right to be political beings, but also where it seems that violence is the only question and answer they can receive. So I decided that I wanted to do a political party for immigrants, 2005. It was interesting because I talked to Brigitte from Iceland the other day about the political party because I still want to do it, and probably I'll do it here in Sweden in the residency I'm going to have in January to March. We'll see how it goes. She told me, like, sometimes you want to do political stuff and you have resistance. It's not the moment. It's fine. So I'm like, okay. So in the meantime, I also feel that when you do this kind of political and socially engaged artwork, you cannot come only with your idea and impose it, but you have to be very sensitive and permeable in terms of what is the the sphere, the situation, the dynamics you encounter. And I felt that in the United States also is different from other places where, in this case, they only have two parties. They have now the independent party, but it's very weak. And the idea of coming with a political party might not work. So all the big social change that happened in the United States has happened with movement, like social movements. And this is, of course, before Occupy Wall Street. And, when I was talking about movement, we were talking about what name we would say was a movement. And it sounded so old. Remember, we were like, oh, that's so old, like the 60s, like the African American movement. And then a year later, all this crazy stuff sound. So it was in collaboration between Creative Time and Queen's Museum, who actually have given a multi-year support to the project. And this is where it is. It is in Corona, Queens, where is the biggest concentration of especially Latin American immigrants, but also is the place where more languages are being taught across the United States, because there are people from all over the world, but also from very different regions within the different countries. So basically, the kind of rules for this project is the Create Immigrant Movement, which is I Am International, a community where we link practical knowledge with creative knowledge and to create some sort of political outcome. How we did that? We actually understood that as artists, you cannot come to this community and say, oh, come and paint, come and do sculpture, because they don't care about that. They have a lot of problems they have to solve, real situations like jobs and kids. And so we decided that we're going to use arte útil, which is something we can talk about maybe in the conversation, which is something I'm being advocating, which is using art as a tool, but in which you actually understand what is the need of the person you're working with, and using creative outcomes to bring some sort of solutions for that. And in this case, I'm going to give you one example very quickly. The main demand is to learn English because they need to communicate, and we had a group of women who say we don't understand our kids because they barely speak now Spanish. They speak English all the time in the school. We cannot communicate with the professors. We said, okay, fine. And then we did an art history class for them to learn English. And the subject of their history class was the female figure in art history. So it was a triple thing. They learn English, they learn how other people look at them as women, and third, we talk about emotional abuse and domestic violence. So it was so none of the classes we give are one way. They always have like multiple, and that is very important for us. It's a holistic approach. We also think about immigrant movement as a think tank, where we really advocate for the role of immigrants in society, and a role in which you recognize not only their strengths and their working possibility, but also the kind of training they come with from the places they arrive. So here we are doing some of the actions. We also want to, and it's something we're practicing more now, to have an activist approach. So we actually train through different workshops this community that is coming with us to understand how to develop a language to talk in the public sphere, a language that changes the imaginary of people about them. So this is something we are doing. This is, for example, an event we did the first year, which is the Migrant Manifesto, which actually we presented at the United Nations. We also presented Occupy Wall Street, and that's NATO there. And we also made a call, which I'm very happy to say that it has continued without even me making a call, in which we asked people to read the manifesto wherever they were. And this created an interesting relation between artists and immigrants, because a lot of artists are immigrants themselves, but they don't see themselves as immigrants, because when we say immigrant, we think poor, undocumented, uneducated, and that's one of the first fights we have to have. We are all immigrants, more privileged, less privileged, but we should be solidary with each other, otherwise they want to keep fucking us up. So then the thing we want to work on is see how can we create alternative economy so the project can be a little more independent. So the first year we tried to reproduce this kind of organization, so it was more about us learning the needs. Second year we built up a community, relationship, and I have to say that Tom, before he left, he wanted to know, we have served more than 40,000 people, which is a lot. And these are people who come and go, and in a day-to-day base, we have around 600 people that are actually there, coming all the time, and so on. So this is one of the events we did too. And we also do stuff, we have done things with incarcerated population of immigrants. So we all not only go inside our neighborhood, but trying to reach other places. The third year we concentrate on arte útil because it's the methodology we use for the project. And also we had a residency in which we invited artists. The community chose the project. And that was for us very good because then you could see who really they think served them, So we invited these people to come for the summer and for 3 months and do projects with the community. Then this year we have concentrated on creating the council. This means I'm not in charge of the project anymore. And this is part of what I always advocate, that artists should be initiators and not property of the artist, this project. And what we did, this is very important, in 2013 we created a 7 months project for transitioning, because I think it's very delicate, this transition. You cannot just leave it to them like, I don't want to do it anymore, and that's your problem, so you have to train people. So we did a workshop called La Escuelita, the little school, in which we train them in contemporary social engaged art. So now they know what intervention means, what installation, so they have a vocabulary which they understand the practice, but also they were part, for example, of 2 main public art projects in 2013. They were part of Susan Lacey's project that also Creative Time generated, and they were part of Thomas Hirschhorn project. So they were understanding what our project is through seeing it in other people. The second part of this school was just plain and simple activism, like what is a leader, how you organize, how you govern yourself as a group, etc. So from that group, they decided who wanted to be in the council. And this is who now, so it is a real empowerment thing. So the next year, what I would like to do is focus on actions. Why? Because we feel now the group has become really politicized. Actually, something really beautiful happened when I was in the first meeting of the council. I wanted to explain them why I have, why I want to be a little away from the project, because I have all these actions I want to do, and usually I do risky stuff, and I don't want to put them in risk, and they were very offended. They say, let us decide if we want to get risk or not. Show us the projects you want to do. Tell us the actions you want to do, and we decide if we want to take the risk. I'm like, okay, fine. So, because it's always this, and that really showed me how ready they are to start action. And I'm very happy because I never wanted to impose, so I think that was, they're asking, so that's now. So this is what we're going to do next year, So, basically, we have started building up to actions, to these different actions we did. This is showing how much money the immigrants are giving to taxes, which is something that usually is not known. We work with a lot of people, and this is very important because mostly when you are seeing this project, it's an artist coming to talk, and this cannot happen unless you have like a lot of people giving their time. And the thing that has happened is almost has become a little school, the project, because we have every year one coordinator that is for 1 year. And it's funny because then they go to work into other organizations. So we have all this, it's becoming a little network of training people to work with the community. So one thing that happened is immigrant movement is called Immigrant Movement International, right? So we went to Mexico and tried to install this project. one thing important, every time we go to a place, the project morphologically change, because in the case of Mexico, it was during the elections. And also Mexico has a long history about the political parties and so on. So finally I put the party of the migrant people. And as you see, the logos change, because I want to make sure everybody feels is related, but they have different identities. So in this case, we focus on some actions. We did political actions in the street. In this case, we had 100 voceros. Voceros is the people who speak the news of the newspaper and shout the news. And they were shouting all the rights immigrants have, but nobody knows. In Mexico, part of the thing in Mexico is there is no education about the issue. Then we were working with this Sala de Arte Público Siqueiro for the project, and we visited a lot of immigrant places, houses. One thing that was very different is like the goal for this project was two goals. First, to make the candidates talk about immigration, not about the Mexican who immigrate to the United States, but about the problem with the internal immigration and the immigration from the south. People from Guatemala, all these places coming and being actually, incredible enough, the reproduction of the mistreat of immigrants that they suffer in the United States, they do to the people coming to Mexico. That was extremely interesting to see, and it's scary. And then it was very interesting because we were on the newspaper all the time, and we were actually calling the other candidates. And actually the last day of the debate, one of the candidates, the one that knew he was not going to win, had a platform about immigrants that had the 4 points that we had. And I was like, it was so nice, but he didn't recognize us, but it doesn't matter. The subject was discussed. And then we decided the second point was to actually enter every 6 years they open up to potential new parties. Of course it's not, it's corrupted and you need a lot of money, etc. But they had made this gesture. And actually we applied, we did all the paperwork, and we are number 45 on this potential 50. Unfortunately, what happened, I was telling Lisa, is that the people, the institution I was working with only had money for one exhibition and for a certain amount of time. And actually, I stretched it a lot, like 6 more months. You know that, right? And then, but at some point, it's like, well, we don't have, we can't invest anymore. And these kind of projects, 3 years ago, it was harder than now. I think now I'm in a better position as an artist, but also people understand better how this works. So maybe, hopefully now I get that to do it. And so then, unfortunately, it became just that, right? And then one thing that happened is Immigrant Movement International, I always wanted to create cells. So the cell of Corona Queens is called now Immigrant Movement Corona. And, and it's dealing with these issues, the specific issues of the place. That's a postcard we did. To sustain the project, we wanted to do postcard and send it some. And then, of course, we want that it relates to the specificity of the communities, but also the political needs, which seems to be the same, but sometimes have the nuances. And then now we have Immigrant Movement International, which I changed the logo. It's here. I tattoo it just in case, to not forget it. And this is what I'm doing now. So we're going to have, for example, that was the banner we did for the festival in Germany. So we actually people got really mad at us, as you can see. And so the thing is that, of course, we want to work that way, and we want to create these cells, everywhere we go. And this is a big flag we created. The festival made the flag of the festival this, which is quite nice. Yeah. And then now we're trying also to intervene in the political sphere. Like I was invited to the European Parliament to talk about immigration with this group that is amazing. It's called European Alternative. I promote them because they are really, really good, and they're working all over Europe. to push for better change of laws. So I think this is important too. 1 minute. Okay. And then sometime I have to amuse myself. And I created this project called the Francis Effect, and I actually ask you if you can go online and sign. It's www.dignityhasnonationality.org. And what we're doing is we are collecting signatures to ask Pope Francis to give Vatican City citizenship for immigrants in the world. Yeah. So we have 14,200 signatures. The more we have, the better. And this is our logo. So it's basically immigrant movement is a no border project, as you might have guessed by now. And what we're trying is actually to see if we can build up a different. How can we work locally and internationally to change the laws? And hopefully, political party will come soon to your door. Thanks.
Saving your questions, I hope, to fire them off after the break. But first we will listen to Anna van der Vliet from ICIA to provide also some context for being here in Gothenburg.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Creative Time and Public Art Agency as a representative for ICIA, Institute for Contemporary Ideas and Art, to be part of this Creative Time Summit Gothenburg. My name is Anna van der Vliet, and I am the director and the founder of this rather young independent art organization, which is mainly based here in Gothenburg, also looking at various collaborations with partners elsewhere, in particular in Stockholm. ICIA was founded 2 years ago, in 2012, and just before ICIA was founded, I worked together with Public Art Agency Director Magdalena Malm for mobile art production as a curator. And some of the ideas that was at the core of MAP, mobile art production, in relation to art production and curatorial practice is in many ways also implemented and processed further into ICIA. And MAP was in turn very inspired by Creative Time, so here we are. First of all, I mean, Creative Times existed in many years, was it 42 now? But for international audiences, maybe mostly online, I think it's important to quickly mention that in a Swedish context, the organizational and political structures for working with contemporary art outside of a traditional art gallery space is very underdeveloped. And that has, of course, to do with the logic of the cultural politics in Sweden. And the actual idea of what art is or can be is still very much shaped by a modernistic approach. So where art production is made in a studio, the result, an artwork, is exhibited in a Kunsthalle or in a traditional wide cube space, and the audience is involved through educational programs connecting the content of the exhibition to a wider audience or to a larger society. But I do believe there must be a system creating a broader structure for organizations to work with this variety of different artistic productions that we see in the world today, and also in Sweden, and to kind of accommodate the increasing need of platforms for more complex and collaborative projects, which is often the case in this kind of production. So this is one of the reasons that ICIA wants to work with this, to kind of commit to the production space of socially and politically engaged art. In Sweden today, we're also simultaneously in a period of transformation, from going from a 100% publicly funded cultural structure for art and culture in general, to more and more kind of becoming dependent on private funding. As in the States, of course, this is already implemented fully in the system, whereas here it's not. So it's a change, and it's a reality that we kind of need to enhance and react to or be part of. And that has, of course, a large impact also on the kind of spaces that we can create, spaces of action. Someone did mention this weekend in Stockholm, I think it may have been Maria Lind, because I know she's very interested in these questions, that we live in an era of projects, projectification as we call it in Swedish. And of course this also challenges building sustainable and long-term structures for some of the more of the core challenges in working with socially and politically engaged art, because it's implemented. I'm talking about the notion of time, of course, the notion of risk, and the notion of failure, which is very much part of working in this kind of ways. I think Unita said in the introduction on Friday morning that we tend to expect every art project to kind of deal with everything, like, you know, everything from economical critique to gender equality and so on. And I do partly believe that these expectations are shaped from the idea of project with a clear starting and end point. And we kind of need to see more into that and work with that as an important challenge of today. I've also been thinking a lot about another participant of this Creative Summit, is Vilka, I don't remember his surname. Nielsen from Copenhagen, who's working partly with this organization called Trampoline, which is working together with newly arrived immigrants waiting for asylum or waiting for the paperwork to be made, which is a process that can take a very long time, up to several years for some people. And she was also talking about the rarity of the curators of wanting to commit to long-term projects or to the long-term time-based project. And I think she has a point here. I'm not so sure why though, but I think it's something that maybe we can talk a little bit about, the position of the curator in relation to this long-term, short-term projects, and what the reason for this is. So having introduced this, I wanted to just say that ICIA, as I see it, we have an important role to play in the kind of cultural political discourse today in Sweden, and we firmly believe that the structures need to change, basically, to accommodate a larger ecosystem of artistic practice. We're not only creating our own platforms for art productions, but we want to build and be an active part in kind of creating and shaping structures so that more artists, more curators, more organizations and thinkers that are working within this field can continue doing so. And this is actually really important to us. So, I'm now going to present a large exhibition project that ICIA was curating in relation to the Swedish recent election in September this year. I was curating this project together with artist Maja Hamarian, who's unfortunately not here because she just had a little baby. But she's also involved in ICIA in many ways. The project is called Motbilder in Swedish. The English translation would be counterparts. This project is actually so recent and so complex that I still haven't had a chance to actually think what we've done, basically. We haven't had a chance to sit down in the kind of production unit together with artists and other involved to analyze and to look more into all the different situations that occurred within this project. But I am, though, of course, fully aware of all the complexity and the enormous amounts of risks and challenges that we as an organization, of course, met, but also as individual artists and curators. And some of the pitfalls that we hopefully were trying to avoid, or did avoid, but also some of the pitfalls that we went straight into. So, for us who have been in Stockholm this past few very interesting, intense few days, we have been so much introduced to very, very successful kind of projects and examples. But maybe we can take this time tonight, when the kind of the way we structured this evening is a little different, to also talk about the risks and the failures. And I'd really like to invite all of you to kind of be part of analyzing at least some of my curatorial issues. And the vulnerability, I think it's a key word here. We all put ourselves at risks, and working in this kind of era of art or area of art is contented with lots of challenges that is very hard to predict. And you have to kind of keep meeting them throughout the projects and the processes. So my position as a curator, of course, and NATO, being very experienced curator in this field, let's try to open up our weaknesses and doubts. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about that, and maybe we can learn something. At least I want to learn something from tonight. So, the two main questions, Lisa, that you raised for tonight was how does art in public space make room for social and political acts and reflections? And what conditions and prerequisites make these processes possible? And yeah, so this is very much into the project that we were doing. The exhibition took place between August 22nd and 14th of September, roughly about 3.5 weeks. It did vary a little bit between the different projects, but it was taking place in various locations around Gothenburg. To a great extent, counterparts involved new artistic works of artists, but also included poets and activists that in various ways tackled the public realm through speeches, statements, city tours, installations, video, text and performance. So it was a variety of different expressions taking place. And through their individual artistic practices, the participants were invited to the project to respond to the kind of worn neoliberal discourse that dominates our time. And it was very much about language, public communication, power, and how one creates and manifests the stories about a city and the state of citizenship. Who is included, but more importantly, who is not included. The starting point was the city of Gothenburg, both as a physical space, but also as a mental state and public image. So of course one needs to start with a kind of overall question here. Is it at all possible to use art to displace the existing stories, provide other perspectives, or counterpart images to the dominant discourse? My conviction is that it is possible. It can be possible, but it doesn't necessarily, or rather, quite rarely, actually do this. However, we need to have a goal, of course, and my belief is that art can be a space of action. That is probably the core kind of idea for ICIA, is to work with a space, see art as a space. It can be used as a tool, as you were talking about, or a platform for other ideas. The project was mainly made possible through a grant from the private foundation Postkodlotteriet, the national lottery, not national lottery, the lottery, which is a private foundation, which in itself is quite interesting, since this project obviously probably is quite looked at as a rather critical or political project. It's quite interesting to see, that this couldn't actually be realized without the private funding in Sweden, structure of Sweden today, the cultural field of Sweden in general. So of course, Karl-Oskar and Nathan are here from one of the productions that were made within the counterpart exhibition, and he'll talk more in depth about that. But I'll just give you a slide to present some of them. There were actually 42 participants in this project, 14 bigger projects taking place in various locations, so I can't talk about them all. I can only give you a really brief introduction. Hopefully, or I think, a lot of people who are here today have also actually seen at least some parts of it. But it's very important to say that this exhibition, or whatever we would like to call it, was not to be treated as biannual. No? Okay. Having said that, I mean that we never really wanted it to be looked at as one project that was dependent on the other, or that the audience necessarily had to see everything to get a clue what it was all about. But it was very important for us to kind of to look at each project as individual in one way, and it had its own logic, and it had its own audience and its own context. It was in public and semi-public spaces, but also in private spaces. I mean, for some parts didn't even, weren't even available. The artist Roxy Farad, she showed one film that was only accessible to women and transvestites, so no men were included or allowed to even come into the exhibition space. I think that's also important. The publication, which you've seen at the front and the back from here, was a 32 pages publication that was made and distributed with as an advertisement supplement to the daily newspaper here in Gothenburg called Göteborg. So 86,000 subscribers of Göteborgs-Posten also received this paper in the morning of the 22nd of August. But we also did an extra edition of 14,000 samples that were distributed around the city. You can actually get one here today if you want. It's in the entrance. The publication was also a way of examining the kind of bought public space. I mean, what is an advertisement supplement really? It's a company you can buy a space as a newspaper that's actually distributed to us reading the daily newspapers. And what does that mean? So we tried to do an advertisement supplement that you wouldn't necessarily, or you would rarely see. You would probably never see an advertisement supplement, at least in this kind of liberal daily newspapers, Göteborgs-Posten. And it consisted of text-based art pieces, and also poems by, for instance, Dimen Abdullah, Meira Ahmemulic, Athena Farrokhzad, and others. It also consisted of more analytical text on relevant issues, such as new public management. We had extracts from thinkers like Chantal Mouffe, who was also here in Gothenburg, invited here to talk in a lecture. And many of the texts that we used were already printed elsewhere, for instance, in cultured journals, which we have quite a good flora of here in Gothenburg, and that make, I think, a very important part of the public sphere that is not reached out, obviously, to so many people. So we reused some texts that we thought would be relevant to this project. Yeah, no. Oh, 2 minutes. It says 9 on mine. Oh, really? Okay. Oh, this is how I've been planning all day, wrong with my That's so funny. Okay, I'll just go through quickly. So, for instance, this text-based art by Open Letter to Work and Camaraderie, 1936-2013 by Jana Gustafsson, was both in publication and showed during the night time in a very specific location in Gothenburg called Brunnsparken, where a lot of the election campaigns were taking place. So in the night, when all the election campaigns were closed down, she took over, you can say, with her message throughout this text-based piece. The same with The Alphabet of Feeling Bad by Karin Michalski, a Berlin-based artist, who did this project together with Anne Svetkovic. Was also published in the newspaper or in this advertisement, but it was also screened in a hotel room that was open for 3.5 weeks to the audience to come and lie in a bed and see kind of this text in the ceiling. There you go. See a side of that. And one of the more visible project was made by the Polish artist Joanna Rakowska, who was invited actually 2.5 years ago here to Gothenburg to work with me on another project. But it was so complicated, her idea of working with this installation, which is a 250 square meter big rug made of New Zealand wool, really like high quality wool, taking the shape of kind of abstract Persian rug, the typology of the dragon, which according to the typology of the Persian rug, it stands for power. And this was technically such an advanced and complicated installation that it took us 2.5 years both to fundraise but also of course to find technicians that could actually do it, because it's a very rainy and stormy city. And this gave a lot of reactions that some of them could anticipate beforehand, but a lot of them were quite shockful to us actually, how it was. This is a space I can also tell for you who's not from here that this is a space where a lot of the demonstrations take place, and we wanted to actually take this space throughout that period of time to make sure that other political parties could not use that space before the election took place. But what happened was that the police made a mistake. So the Swedish Nationalist Party did actually get a permission to demonstrate, even if we also had a permit for the installations. There was a mistake by the police between two different departments, but that again happened, made some other things come out from the project that I think was very interesting. This is another new commission that was made or showed in this project. It's called The Curse of Giving and the Curse of Begging by Cecilia Parsberg, where she worked with 10 beggars, mainly from Romania, that are based here in Gothenburg, and 10 givers to work on a 3-day process together with a choir leader on all the emotions of this informal kind of politics that takes place on the streets. So, yeah. Okay, I'll leave it like that. Thank you.
For bringing in the first part of your presentation, talking about the conditions for what we are doing. So we move on with the non-existent center, which produced the project as part of ICI's motbilder counterparts. Carlos and Harun.
Ja.
Hörs du mig där borta? Anders? Sådär. Hallå? Ja.
Alltså med tekniken, tekniken ibland funkar inte. Bara att de säger så många folk här.
Pinsamt. Yeah. As Anna said, we were a part of this exhibition, Counterparts. So we're going to focus on that work that we did and try to explain the main structure of it. And hopefully we can reach a little bit of the emotional room that we try to achieve with the work. As you see here, the Non-Existent Center is an art group. So it's the three of us sitting here, and also Karin. So it's Karin, me and Harun who was responsibility of this work. A gift from Harun that we will talk about. We haven't have the time to reflect because the work has its own life right now, and hopefully we have some people in the audience that are carriers of the work. So if you want to join the discussion or reflection, I'm more interested about your thoughts right now. But I think Harun wants to say something also at the beginning.
English. I'm not so good at English, definitely. I apologize for that. But I have some interpreter, but a little bit help for me. Jag heter Herman Nathan och jag är aktivist och kämpar för mänskliga rättigheterna. Och sen några vet om och jag brukar också mycket göra mycket i samhället och kämpa på. Och yeah.
So my name is Herman Nathan and I'm an activist and I work with improving society and together with other people this is the most important part of what I do.
Yeah, and I'm working with the non-existent center with Kauri, and Alexandra is also, and Josefina is here, and we are so big group definitely with Clara Hjelmer or something. I can't say the name of it so much. We are so much strong group definitely. I want to start to present my project, but before I want to present my project, I want to start to tell for viewers take in 2 minutes.
A silent minute.
Yeah.
It's going to tell you why.
Yeah. Because this 2 minutes or a silent minute is the thing is the 2 weeks ago. It's when sheep is want to come to Greece, and then the sheep is and så folket drunknade i vattnet så båtarna kraschade och 26 personer dödade och det var på båten 46 personer.
So it was a ship traveling from Turkey to Greece, right?
Yeah.
With people from Afghanistan, so people on flight. And there were 46 people on the ship, and 26 died when the ship kantrade, I don't know what it is, turned around in the water and fell down.
Yeah. That was so hard for me, and I think so for everybody's hard, this situation. The immigrant situation is so difficult in Sweden, but we should take a silent minute, just for 1 minute, and then we talk more. Thanks. I want to represent my project that I think it's better to start for a cluster.
Yeah.
And then I should share it with
So I will talk about how a little bit of the reason why we did this, a gift to Harun, and the background for it. So it started that we became friends 2 years ago, Harun and me, and the group. We started to work together, and then we got an invitation from the Göteborg International Biennial to do something, and they gave us a resource, a huge bus and they want us to go to the countryside because they don't want the vinyl to just be in the center, and they know that we're working with the questions and somehow is connected to the conflict between center and periphery. So we went to, or we had a collaboration with Not Quite. I can see Kalle here in the audience, who was also part of that project. So we visited them, and but the question was then, okay, we have a bus, we have a budget, and we are in this vinyl, and who is often going with this kind of buses, and which people are not going on these buses. So we starting to talk about that, and try to see who is actually the most hardest for us as me, a white culture worker in Gothenburg, to reach in a way, or to try to invite and give me, or give the situation some new knowledge. So we called Aron directly and asked if he wants to be a part of arranging a busscharter. So then we became more people, so half of the group have experience of living in Sweden as undocumented, and half of the group was, we invited the culture elite, like the artistic leaders and so on, to sharing this trip together. Yeah, thank you. And then during this work, hold on, what happened then? Because I want to go back there. A beautiful idea, sharing ideas and känslor. And we were actually in a room where we had the Frihetsgudinnan, yeah, Statue of Liberty, and she was mashed up with umbrellas in her head. And what happened then, Harry?
And then I see that I think much for that, and I say for years it couldn't be possible to fix like umbrella, and then you say, and I'm much focusing for that, and you say, yeah, it couldn't be possible to fix that. I have the idea to fix myself, but then Karl-Oskar said it couldn't be possible to fake with like umbrellas by hand. To you made it like by project, fixing project.
Yeah, I don't really. But the main thing, you want to give umbrellas to the people in Göteborg because the weather was so awful.
Yeah.
But it was also a symbol of giving something to someone that needs something.
Yeah.
And then we started to talk, and then we said, okay, we should give away a lot of umbrellas.
Yeah.
And we had an amount that we have a huge struggle with, and then we were working a lot with Anna and Maja, and also Kjell here, and talking about, okay, we have the idea of umbrellas, and the idea was that we should give them away in some symbolic way.
Yeah. So
we're starting to think a lot about the power of the gift. What is actually a gift? And that a lot of our ethical starting points is, okay, we're sharing something, we're giving something, and then we're starting to think about the philosophical way. What is the philosophy of a gift? And you give away something, and you receive something, and then maybe you need to give something back, but it's quite open there. So then we build up the structure at the City Museum here in Gothenburg, where we invite people, as in like a drop-in invite. So people could just come to this gift center and receive a gift from Harun.
Yeah.
And then we also give the information that you can see here. And then when they've received this and they have entered this interactive installation, looked like this. We have a queuing system, and it was very calm in a way, and we really tried to take care about people. We was working a lot with about time, so people need to wait quite long, but it was very strict. And then when you're waiting here, our co-workers, Karin and Pervana, was taking the audience to the next room. No, not to the next room. This is the check-in situation. Here is the waiting room. And when you've been sitting there in the waiting room for a while, Harun was coming in. And this was a huge room. And you didn't know about the gift, but now you know.
Yeah.
It's a golden umbrella with a sign inside that says a gift from Harun. Then the situation was that Harun was... how did you do this? Could you explain in Swedish?
Yeah, I will
In
come
Swedish
back.
or
Yes.
English? No?
In Swedish, I think so.
Okay.
Från början när vi gjorde den här båtkartan tillsammans med Klosker. Och det är den att när det kom idén till mig och vi med Not Quite, den här center tillsammans. Och med många papperslösa och flyktingar och några andra var med. Och det är den att jag presenterade mitt nya verk och varför jag gjorde det här verket och hur är min verk och det presenterade för folk där. Och sen efter några månader att jag hörde att jag ville göra den här verket på riktigt. Och det var verkligen väldigt tacksam för att vi får för Anna van der Vliet. Tack så jättemycket för att vi gjorde den här projekten och driver den här projekten. Väldigt okej.
Jag tänkte lite mer på den här. Vad var det som hände där? Den
Ja,
bilden.
aha, men alltså jag kommer lite från bakgrunden. Men,
vi kollar lite här.
Ja, men den här det är kontakt ögon med ögon, reflektera shared känsla, man kan säga. Och det var väldigt starkt för några andra och några de gråtade under paraplyerna när de fick gå från mig. Och samtidigt så här, varsågod, de är lite så här nervösa så här, varsågod, du kan få några det gråtade och kan inte ska säga så det kommer jättemånga skulle kunna ta emot andra kan du gå ut och gråta lite ute.
Are you translating or?
So Harun was talking a little bit about the background. That the idea was came about when they were doing this bus charter to Not Quite, and the first sort of spark of the idea, and then a few months later he started working on it more concretely together with the Non-Existent Center, and then of course it became a reality through the collaboration in counterparts. But then the question from Koloskar was more specifically about the moment when the eyes meet, and Harun was talking then about how emotions are shared within the framework of eye contact, and that it was very strong for a lot of people when they were standing there under the umbrella together with him. There were a few people who cried, and it was quite a nervous place to be, both for Harun and for the people who came, and sometimes it got a bit awkward that he had to like show them out and you now have to go outside and cry. So I have to take on the next person coming in.
It was like that, and it's the pictures it's like showing up. Och sen den här projekterna det handlar om flyktingfrågor och hur ser ut situationen för människor idag. Hur drabbades människor utom samhället. Och som att jag sagt att samhället att det funkar jättebra för er, för för oss och för alla, men några inte kan känna sig trygg på den samhället. De är papperslösa och kan inte få typ så här, man kan inte få till sjukvård och skola och att känna sig trygg på riktigt en människa. Och den känner sig att det är nervös och väldigt stressad och hur man skulle kunna gömma sig någonstans och de har alltid stress. Ja. Och det är den vi gjorde det och visa det är parallellt så här att visa det, hur är det utifrån världen idag till människor. Och som vi har i alla fall 30 000 papperslösa i Sverige. Men när vi gjorde projektet det var 20 000, nu är det mellan 30 och 50 000. För att det planet var att skulle kunna vilja göra 20 000 paraply. För att det skulle kunna visa för de 20 000 papperslösa vi har. Men nu är det ännu mer. Det är väldigt svårt.
So I think we have to break for the translation here.
Yeah.
So this project was about immigrants today and how it is to live outside society. That society works really well for some people, but not for all. And especially if you don't have undocumented. Thank you. You don't have access to hospital, education, and so on. But what is repeatedly as a sort of emotion in your life is that you don't feel safe, and that you're afraid and you feel you have to hide. And today there is 30,000 undocumented in Sweden. At the time when we did this project there was 20,000, and the idea was to have 20,000 umbrellas, so that you would have a body mass of umbrellas that equaled the amount of people who lived undocumented.
And we can, I mean, we're running out of time here,
Yes.
but you can just end to say that in discussion together and with your experience, we try to reach an emotional room where we could reflect and feel about why is some people giving shelter here in Sweden, and why is some people why are we not giving some people shelter with this very like easy symbolic action. There was not so many words in it, and it was about time and to contemplate. That was the idea of it, and also have this maybe the feeling of the reversed gift, and then also for the discussion after dinner about public space, because we had the idea of okay, we're doing this, we're creating this very intense emotional room in a way, but then we let them out, and because also Gothenburg is one of the rainiest cities, we think a golden umbrella could be useful, and you can share with people, and it's very visible in the public space here. And we still, I see some golden umbrellas once in a while, and I know that people have them and use them. And we are interested about what just a quite posh or object could do. Because you need it and you carry it, and we know that people asking other people, where did you get that umbrella from? And then we're starting a discussion maybe about how it is somehow are related to the very, very important discussion about how is it to live in Sweden as an undocumented, and what about Swedish migration and European migration politics. That we need to go in that room, so we try to make this small room outside in the streets. Thanks.
Thank you very much. You want to say something?
Jag vill bara säga en liten sak. Att jag jobbar med konst och älskar konst, och att det är min hjärta. Och jag vill presentera mitt nya projekt, kan jag säga.
Vi tar det sen.
Ja, jag visst.
Ta ett break.
There's more time after the break to discuss and bring in other things. So before we have our break, we will listen to Saga Jordaner, who will present the book that is being launched tonight.
Thank you. My name is Sara Jordaner. I'm a lecturer at the Valand Academy. So in the winter and spring of 2014, 13 emerging artists from Nepal, US, Iran, Jamaica and UK, Canada, Iceland, Finland and Sweden were all participating in the Masters of Fine Arts program in Valand Academy, conducted field trips to Kalv, a locality of 380 inhabitants, 80 kilometers from Gothenburg. So this is a place that one artist referred to as extremely remote. The artists developed projects in dialogue with this rural community, and these projects were shown in the former schoolhouse that became a temporary roof for this exhibition. So our publication was produced to offer a longer and different type of engagement with the community and tell others about the CALV project. It consists of 2 parts that support each other. The processes where the artists are talking about what it entailed to embark on this project. And here, the dialogues, which is a reflection. This second part was produced 6 months after the exhibition. And it's called Dialogues, and it also has reflective text by myself and Fredrik Svensk. And we have some copies out in the lobby by the entrance. They're free. We want to distribute them here tonight. Very nice that we can launch this publication in this very nice context. Also want to thank Bob Kelly, who's here tonight, that invited us and owns the schoolhouse, and of course all the artists and the amazing designer, Niklas Persson, who designed this publication. Should be here also. Thank you.
I have a problem, which is that I can't see anything with this strong light. So if somebody actually has a question, you have to almost stand up and wave your arms. And I would like to actually start with asking you if there's anyone who has a particular question for any one of the presenters to begin with.
I do.
Great.
Hello. Is it working? Yeah? Well, I guess first I'd like to say to Skogan, tack för maten. It was like super good. Thank you very much. And also, this event's been really interesting. I'm really pleased at the opportunity to ask a question because I was with my classmates. We were at Val and we went to Creative Time and had a really, I think the term intense was used, and there was like lots of opportunities to learn lots of things. But I guess I really wanted to ask NATO, as the responsible for Creative Time, and just what your particular sort of thinking was behind the format, or what your strategy was for the format of the summit. And I know quite a few of us here were there and experienced it, and maybe some people watched it online, but perhaps just to summarise, it involved a lot of quick presentations that were very, what I understood to be they were explanatory, because I guess 10 minutes, that's the only sort of thing that you can do within that. Well, to some extent. And also, the whole format of the summit felt very motivational, and it was very positive. But I didn't know how much room there was for dissent within that, or critique, or the academic framing. And I just wondered if that was part of the strategy of Creative Time.
Yeah, totally. I want to make sure. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hello? Okay. Hey, thanks. Glad you asked that. Thank you. Thanks for coming out there. That's awesome. So here's some of the thoughts behind the kind of structure. Just to be fair, they call it Petrakucha, the kind of like quick kind of presentation style. Certainly that when we picked it up, it's kind of spread. I mean, it feels kind of like TED, and I can't stand TED for the record. But that said, there are certain methodologies that are similar. It's fast because we want a lot of presentations, first of all. Just in terms of scale of people to present in a day, you need to have time limits on everyone. We also have the music that we gently tell people to shut up, which I always enjoy. We have music that kind of cuts people off elegantly. But also because, and it's very project-based, and you're right, there's no discussion or critique in the summit itself. One thing that's really important to think about is that it's, we really want to present a global, I think of the curating of this as like a algorithm. There's a lot of needs to put together, which is gender, race, equity in terms of representation, and global as well as practice. We have politicians, we have academics, we have activists, we have artists, and the hybrid of all of that, right? And so to just get all that on the stage and with global representation requires a lot of people. We also, another form that's at work in the summit is social capital as a form. And I really strongly believe social capital is a form that we should all get more familiar with manipulating and being aware of it. People typically point at things, and what I mean by social capital is famous or not famous, to be simple, right? So you have famous artists, you got not famous artists. You got people that are making money on their projects, and you have people that are making no money on their projects. And social capital has different powers too, which we could get into, but it's another thing that's in the algorithm of who's presenting. The thing about critique, why there's no... The positive part is like, I'm very positive when I look positive, but I'm actually a deeply cynical person. And I'm highly critical. And but I'm really tired of critique as the go-to narrative of the left. I'm a big believer in practice being a way of speech, that the politics of doing produces its own politics and concerns. But we have come from a tradition that we think language is the style of critique. But I think practice is a style that produces its own critiques. And I like focusing on practices because often our language, or the way we talk about politics, stops things very fast. The conversation doesn't grow, but there's a lot of fluidity within practice. And that fluidity I'm really interested in. The other part I like, honestly, we're going to build more space for the audience to discuss as the summit evolves. But I also like giving people a lot of stuff that they're frustrated with at the end. Because inevitably you will go to the bar and argue with people about what just happened. And it builds up this kind of like, and then you can't have a group discussion with 600 people. Just methodologically, it's very difficult.
That's my next project.
Yeah. So it's really, just what we want to produce is more social spaces where this kind of stuff can be debated. Sorry. Oh God. Well, more stuff can be debated around that. And finally, I'd also say that, we really tried, also it's just, the thing's choreographed. Oh, that's the final thing I want to say is that I grew up as an activist, and I have sat through more boring political art discussions than I care to discuss. And so this summit is really evolved out of my deep frustration with how conversation's produced on the left. And it's nothing drives me more crazy than conversation about art and politics that feels like hell. Like it's boring. Or you're just going to be sitting in a room just arguing with stuff. And you're like,
Okay, you made your point.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question? Somebody trembling inside? No. So I think we will talk about vulnerabilities. But I would like to start, as I did set up two sort of thematics for this evening. One which was, what sort of spaces does art offer that perhaps activism or straight politics does not? And one way of asking this question is actually by asking you, Tanya, who in your project that you showed us, Immigrant Movement International, attempted to also create a political party. It's something that you said that you now really want to do. Can you talk a bit about that? Like why the difference between running it as an art project and the need to then create a real political party, and how...
Okay, well, it's very ironic because there are two very important artists who did political parties before, like Joseph Boy and Schneeminchev. They did it, But I think there is this idea that art is an educational space and not so much an action, a space for action, for direct action in politics. And so I think at the beginning I wanted to do it in Paris, which is when I had the idea in 2005, and I started going to all these meetings with all these activist groups and all these immigrant groups. And they actually, what I realized is that they really despised the political structure, the institutional politics, and the parties, because they've been used all the time, right? And they've not been represented. So it was very hard to sell them the idea. It was only one group of Algerian refugees, of course, very highly politicized, who were actually entertaining the idea, well, what if? Why not? The thing is, like, there was no art organization that will back me up on that at the moment, and also there was no money for that at all, and I don't sell work so much or anything. So, and then Creative Time came in, and I said, let's do that, and we did it, and then I realized that you have to adapt to the place. You cannot come, with this, as I said before, like, oh, let's do a party. In the United States, it makes no sense to do a party. Because people don't even want to hear about it. Because they are also fed up with this idea of the one party that looks like two. That's how they see it. I don't think it is the truth, but it is how it's being seen. So I think the whole time I've been battling, because I'm not doing it as an art piece only, and I'm trying to work with the people who can make the political difference. If I were like a bunch of us artists doing it, it would be done in like 2 months. We do parties and parties for the party. It would be like happy, everybody's engaged. But I really wanted to enter the political sphere, and I've been like meeting the parliaments and the people, the politicians, to try to get in, And I think, so there is this battle between people who don't trust the political system, especially immigrants don't trust it. And many, and we talk about immigrants like it's a one group. Immigrants is complicated because it's a multi-identity group, where you have people who maybe come from the countryside and never been political in their own country. So why be political here? It should make you in more trouble, And you have refugees who have been political activists who are highly smart and so it's a very complicated, and the thing also that I forgot to say in the Creative Time is also we always assume that the immigrants are progressive group. Many times, not all the immigrant groups are progressive. Sometimes they are hyper right-wing, So it's a complicated thing. But more than anything, what I wanted to do is try to reevaluate the form of political existence in the public sphere, right? And giving the immigrants back the political rights. So I think, that's, and also rethink what is a party, which incredible enough, like after, like in these 10 years, the Pirate Party came, now the Feminist Party. So I think this idea of reimagining how can we govern ourselves was the key. And also, I would have to be honest, I was not prepared. I had the idea before I was prepared to do it. Yeah. And that's something you have to understand in this kind of work. You have this great idea, but since you're not drawing it, you have to get ready. And so I had to go through training in some activist schools and shadowing politicians. Like I had to understand this language that artists will share, but also politicians will understand. And you know what it was amazing in Creative Time? After my talk, all the people who approached me and stayed talking to me were politicians. Like politicians and diplomats. So I was like, yes, I think I'm talking their language now. They have this, So I feel like it's this kind of creating a culture. So
do
they
you
hear
understand your project as an attempt to politicize?
No. Like, I have to tell you, I wait 10 years. I want to be in the European Parliament now. No discuss. I don't want to sugarcoat it. That's it. I really would like to finally do it. I know it's going to be tough, but I think, we should do it.
And you hope to start here in Sweden?
We'll see. I mean, let's see. I mean, that's the other thing we were talking before. I think this kind of projects is very important and is strategically important to work with more than one institution. You know, like Creative Time and Queen's Museum, it was so it's good because you have different point of views and also you have multiple supports. Like one group can support you with this, one group has more experience on that. So I think it's important that these kind of social projects have more than one institution collaborating with you. Sorry.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of socially engaged art projects, they really want to politicize people, certain particular groups or a general audience. And I'm curious if any of you have had an experience with that sort of backfiring somehow. I mean, is there unwanted politicization? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, how can we avoid for art projects to be too prescriptive, to try to politicize people in the way that we want them to be politicized?
Can I say something very good? Parenthesis. Yeah. For me, it's not that. What affects me the most is bad taste in aesthetics. What is really driving me nuts? Because I do this project with people who don't have our same training in how things work. And it's really tough because everybody wants to go to the folkloric approach of aesthetics, you know, which is complicated. Because also you have to defend their identity as their own, group. I don't know, I was just saying that. And that's also political. Because sometimes when you come to a country, you become more, like I was more Cuban in the United States than I was in Cuba. You know, so I think that's also political and it's reflective in aesthetics.
And how have you encountered that problematic in your own projects? I mean, has this become an issue that you have to deal with somehow?
Yeah, I think, yes. It's a negotiation between understanding the power of abstract and the power of the value of intellectual labor versus manual labor, in a way, so. Should I say?
Hello. I don't think there's so much interesting for me to say about that. It's better to move on from my perspective. Yes, but I don't have any experience with the backfire situation. I would say.
I mean that in a sort of double way, that in a self-critical way also that. Sometimes our projects really want to achieve a certain intention whilst they are announcing that they want it to be about politicization, but they have a very specific goal in mind.
But in the immigrant movement it happened to me that I really wanted to be political right away, and I realized it was impossible because it's forcing the community, so I need these 4 years for them to become politicized. And it was painful because you really want to do, as an artist, you have the idea you want to just do it. I mean, and also you have to be very careful understanding that there is a process you cannot violate, you know.
Just to say one thing to kind of go to that is certainly at Creative Time we don't actually produce projects with many artists, so we're very picky, and we tend to work with people we trust can navigate that terrain with some maturity and experience and depth. And I say that because it's kind of funny. So when I did a conversation with this artist, Rick Lowe, and we were talking about the rise of this kind of way of working for young people. And I said, what are you going to do, Rick? You're part of a movement that's got all these middle-class white kids going into African-American neighborhoods to help the people. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, at least they're going to get an education finally. And just to say what he meant by that is that those failures will be pedagogical. And the similar kind of failures probably happened during civil rights, when people started knocking on doors and getting to know people. And so in some ways, I mean, we don't try to produce failures per se, but I also think that encountering frictions is better than just stopping and just being like, well, it's too complicated. The other part of that read I'll just say is that the biggest critiques we get, even with the projects I'm the most proud of, tend to be from the art world, speaking on behalf of the exploited person who participated. And for whatever reason, they feel the exploited person doesn't have the agency like the art world does to have the agency to speak on their behalf.
I remember Lori Jo Reynolds, who's an amazing artist, and she was we were talking in this event, and then she said that exactly that she was criticized by all these people who don't do anything, right? And saying like what right she had to go to those communities where she doesn't belong to. And she said something I really like, it's like, those communities will thank you if you commit to the work and if you do the hard work, because the thing that nobody talks about is like how much work, actual work, all these projects, demand. And if you are in a community and they see that you actually come, and you come, and you come, and you do it, and you are with them, they don't care if you're white, black, rich, poor, you are on their side, and you're actually doing stuff that is good for them, when nobody else is doing. So I think that also has a value that, and the other thing is I don't like when they say working with the community, for the community. If you really do the job properly, there is no collaborator, no co-author, no participant. There is just friends. Like it becomes like a relationship that you cannot classify in this, And it might seem quirky, but it is how it is.
We have a question.
First of all, thanks for your presentations. I'm interested in now when we talk about working for different kinds of organization, like on the public art agency, I could say that as an artist, if you work with that, you work for the state, I guess one could say, or if you work for Creative Time, you work for an organization, an American organization, or if you work for different kinds of projects that lead up to building parties. In your case, you're talking about becoming a member of parliament or European Parliament. And I think that, could we today think about or rethink what it would mean for artists turning into artists working for parties?
For parties?
For parties, like
political parties.
Yeah, for political parties. What would that mean today? It has been a no-no since the Second War, I guess, or since the Cold War, I'm curious about what you think about this. Could you work for a party?
I think a few things. First of all, those structures are really old and they need to be revisioned in terms of their dynamics, in terms of their idea of what democracy is, in terms of how you get there. So in terms of mechanism and structure. But at the same time, I think an artist can only work with them if they retain the possibility of having some freedom to critique them and to propose things that might be uncanny to them. I mean, if you're going to work with them just to serve as a technocrat, then don't do it. As an art technocrat, don't do it. And for example, the ex-director of the Queen's Museum now is the director of the culture of the city of New York. And for example, they invite a group of artists to work with the structure of the government. And the thing is, like, when they talk to me, I say, okay, I have two conditions. I cannot be censored, and secondly, I want to be in all the meetings. They have, that group has. Even if I'm not making any decision. Why? Because you need to understand what the dynamics of politics are. So you, from the inside, can have the information so you can work on the simultaneously inside and outside. Because the problem with artists working with parties and with politicians is that they're always being used for propaganda mostly, right? So there is an education you have to have with these people telling what contemporary art is and what critical thinking through art is. So they understand it's beyond this, do me a poster, right?
So propaganda is a bad thing?
I don't like propaganda because it has no space for doubt and for criticism.
Hi. Oh, that was a bit close. I just wanted to pick up a little bit on something that Tanya was saying earlier on. And throughout all of the presentations, there was this title of this essay by Audre Lorde that just kept going through my head, which is, "You can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools." George, repeat it. Sorry. You can't dismantle the master's house, and how that represents the people that are within the project or not. Because for me, I suppose I started getting itchy when you're talking about giving content to The Guardian, because for me, there's nothing subversive about that. But I understand that there's a certain strategy that you are employing and a choice that you've made about that. But I suppose I just wanted to ask the question across the panel about choices of languages and aesthetics.
Well, so, it's so funny, I so couldn't disagree more with that adage. I think you can totally dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. If the master owns a chainsaw, you can literally chainsaw down the house. And, and I say that because I don't actually believe that tools are ideologically driven. And I think that the stakes against us are very big. And I think arguments that move us into our own obscurity are problematic. And frankly, I think that the tools that are out there, mass media, like for example, mass media, that is a very powerful tool. And handing that over to the master is, I think, a giant mistake. I think that finding methodologies and historically revolutionary movements that have been successful have used every tool available to them. And I also mean on the grassroots level, being very critical of that. I have no problem with critique of it, but I think we really got to be broad in terms of the tools at our disposal. And so, for example, I do think The Guardian is a powerful tool. The Guardian, God bless, was bold enough to produce Chomsky's critiques of late capital that I thought was extremely productive. They've been really productive in printing Naomi Klein's critique of both the combination of transglobal capital as their effects on the environment that a lot of people read and introduced a lot of regular readers to a real critical discussion. That's not possible in an indie at all. I don't want to make it seem like it's only The Guardian whatsoever.
No, but the other thing is change will only happen when you have it coming from so many places that it is a force bigger than them. So I think you have to have both. The pressure from going in the street and telling without any compromise what you think about them, and also infiltrating institutions where, yes, you might compromise a little bit, but then you might do an educational job with them. The problem for me is when you're not so clear when you enter inside the institution what the goal is, and you get fascinated by the institution or by the power. So if you do that, you have to do it as an activist, not as somebody who is playing with power. No, you have to be sure this is an actually infiltration. So it's a tactical. It's not just, oh, I like being with the Guardian, I like being with the rich people. No, you are doing a tactical action. And you need to understand when to withdraw also. For example, the idea of going, I just say European Parliament, so for you to laugh because it's going to be impossible. But I think the right, especially I'm not European citizen, but the right of, the idea of wanting to go into politics is because I feel that there is a moment in which you want also to bring the message to the master and slow the throat, la garganta, so you can enjoy that blood going out of them from close. You know what I mean? And it is because...
You know what I mean?
Have you been there?
No, I totally know what you mean.
No, but the thing is for example, for immigration, you can go every day on the street. They will not care because immigrants don't vote. And immigrants on the side who get selected. That's the vision they have about immigrants. That's why there's nothing. So I think the only way for me is go.
Well, so there's two things. One is we actually break up the organization into two different styles, which is field building, and then I don't even know what the other style is speaking to the broad global audience, not art. So both of them have different kind of powers at work, but the summit was an opportunity to leverage the art world itself. as a certain kind of conditions of power, using the famous people in the art world to legitimate the non-famous, but really speaking still within the discourse of art, you know, and thinking of that as like a Bourdieu kind of thing, where you're kind of looking at power and you're manipulating it as this kind of strategy, and that's fun. But it wasn't about leveraging like mass global audiences. Does that make sense? But we certainly, in terms of this guardian partnerships and that's a very different strategy. And aesthetics and culture forms have to be geared that way. So that's a different way of speaking. It can't be so jargony and art worldy. As broad as the summit is, it's still a little about social, I mean, this phrase, social engaged art, that is, or art practice, or whatever, that's still art world audience-ish, you know? So it's still kind of field building, but we are definitely bigger, and that's just to say too, and to be all candor, we are 25 people who are extremely different, so there isn't a complete coherent ideology. It is still its own series of people with different agendas moving across each other. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And I also think it's very hard to give sort of one solution to this. I mean, every project demands its own research and its own thoughts, and to really rethink also like who is representing the idea here. I mean, who is apart from having a very clear goal, which you don't necessarily always have. That's also something that's coming with the process. So in that sense, it doesn't really, follow any kind of logic, as we tend to see these kind of processes elsewhere in society. And I think to me also that's having been thinking about whether to go into politics or not for many, many years, and I might end up there, like you, who knows. But I think also the art, if I'm not talking about the art world, because there are many different art worlds. Yeah. And the one that you hang out with in New York is obviously very different to the one here in Gothenburg, and so on.
And in New York, there are different art
Of
worlds.
course, in New York as well. So it's many different art worlds simultaneously kind of working. But to find your own space within that, to me, is an opportunity that I find hard to find elsewhere in society. Even if we're struggling here, I love the idea that we can actually talk about things in a way that allows for doubts and allows for critique and self-criticism and also criticism of others, which is very rarely found, at least in the public kind of political discourse, where everything is about getting votes. So, we've moved that.
So the right to be open-ended for as long as you need to
That's also
is very important. Yeah. And what about funding in respect to that? Because I guess traditional, at least Swedish public art funding is about that in a way, that it should be non-instrumental. But across the panel here, has the funding, where the money comes from, has it affected your projects in any way?
Yeah, certainly. But I could refer to the main project that we do. Is the established Gruva, the contemporary arena for art and thoughts, and it's one of in the poorest region in Sweden. Interesting, isn't it? Poorest region in Sweden. But it's of course we are a huge group from different fields that work there and trying to create a platform, and we are very much interesting to be that, to try to make deep research artistically of what is happening here. Why is everyone wants to move out, and why is it the case that this small municipality is also taking care of the most people per capita that seeks for asylum. And of course there is strong powers around us that wants to create, to see us as the regional growth where we are. And I try to relate to what you are talking about, or your question. It's one example is that the municipality wants us to be a part of the future group. In the future group, there was politicians and corporates and NGOs, and we were there. And of course, we were the creative clowns in this situation. And we understand exactly how they could sell this municipality for people. And then we got really scared about this kind of situation. Okay, here is this young artist, and I grew up in this area, so that's the main reason also why we ended up there, because I want to understand what is happening here from a neoliberal global perspective in a way. So we said like, yeah, you need a new slogan. So because they are winning all the bottom prizes, like the poorest region, the worst school, everything, and it's the main media is writing about this municipality, but they even not really going there, just writing this. And we said like, yeah, but sell it in, so Ljusnarsberg, det kan bara bli bättre.
Can only get better.
Ljusnarsberg can only get better. And we think, okay, they cannot really take this serious in a way, because in their terminology, this is too strange. But it ended up as the main sentence for the development of the future of like 20 years ahead. And we went, oh, fuck, what happened here? Of course, because we want to be a bit sincere, because it's really bad in many ways, and we need to look about power and the politicians around the countryside and what is happening here. So hopefully they will not end up a sign with this, but I don't know. In the same way, the other sign would be possibly Ljusnarsberg, the municipality of possibilities, or some crap. So then I don't really know, and we said like, okay, we cannot fulfill our role here in this future group, because if we are continue here, you just not, and then of course they just wrote floskel, what do you call it, like cliches, and we said like, this is not. What do you mean? This is not. Yeah.
But when you left the future group, did you also feel that you let down? I mean, because they were made up of other people in the community also. I mean, it was, I guess, yeah. Did you feel that you were compromising also somehow? Were they giving? I mean, they were funding you partly, or?
Yeah.
So could you take the money and run? That's my question.
But I think we are so, in a way, strange birds in many ways, because I guess these people who are sitting here doesn't exist at all in this municipality. So in a way we try to understand who should we be there, and that's what we're going to work with the next 1.5 years. Investigate with the people there.
But I think it's important not to leave the table. I think that's extremely important. And to be a little patient and understand that there is, before we get what we want, we need to educate these people in who we are and change the image of what an artist is and what is artist doing in society. So I think that's why it's so painful to do this work, and it's so, because you have to work a lot and try to understand that and not feeling yourself a clown, you know? Yeah. But the other thing is, I would love for one of these, because there is a problem with these kind of grants of the state. It almost feels like the artists have to substitute the state solving the problem of the poor and the communities and so on, and then the state doesn't take responsibility, right? And then it's okay because the artists go, make a mural, and hey, everybody's happy, right? So there is this kind of vision that art is solving the problem in this kind of magical way. I always had this immense desire of having a funding project from the state about the rich. Give us money to work with the rich people. And see how we change them too.
So let's talk about that, Tanya.
I've been saying that for 2 years now to people.
Well, the art world's been definitely playing that game in a different way.
Yeah, but a different way.
Jeff Koons has been doing that kind of stuff.
The artists are playing the clown with the rich.
They're doing the clown.
When they cannot fuck them.
Yeah. But I think it's important also to take, because we don't want to leave the table there.
No.
But it's so much about.
No, I didn't talk about
you.
No,
but I'm just in general, like it's also like
something
project time. But when we're doing projects, we need time, and we really need to understand. Okay, in it for us and the agenda? And can we set the agendas? For example, we have invited the politicians and the people who are running the municipality to more philosophical meetings. And then you have because there's a lot of Swedish Democrats represented there, and Moderaterna, and so on, and trying to more talk about from an other angle. And it's very interesting.
So, talking about not leaving the table, we don't have that much time left, but we discussed a bit earlier about the longevity in relationship to temporary projects, and there were some different opinions here about that.
Sorry, about what?
Longevity. Longevity.
Sustainability.
Sustainability, yes. Like the project economy that we live on, and the desire, or not only maybe the desire, but you're also kind of forced to move from project to project because you have to make a living and you have to spread your talents. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, etc. Tanya, you work in long-term projects, and you were also talking about how now it's becoming more and more.
So I clean my system.
Tell us about that.
This is like I need to clean.
This is a kind of cleaner.
Yeah, cleansing of this kind of.
I like that strategy actually. Can you talk more about that? So you have.
No, I think.
I have a whole body of work on my cleaner project.
Yeah, I clean myself in the pole. Sorry, Francisco. I want an audience with you, so I better.
Clean it up.
No, I think it is, as an artist and as activist and stuff, it's a very draining process because you're giving and you receive, but sometimes, So working in the immigrant movement was extremely exhausting emotionally, not so only physically, but emotionally, understanding only how much you can do for changing anything, and how much is a band-aid, of resistance. So sometimes I do when I can. I mean, when I did the art school in Cuba for 7 years, I could not do anything else. Like I could not do any other work at all because it was so intense that there is no mental space to even have an idea. And then 2009 I finished, and I did all the work everybody liked, the tape piece, the horses. Like in 3 months I did like 8 pieces that were all successful. Everybody loved them because I had to get it out. But so I think this is something we have to understand as artists, that that's part of the process, and not be desperate and maybe having these tactics. But I think that's it.
I also, just to say in terms of longevity too, I really think people don't need to beat themselves up. There's different personality types. People are into different things, and I don't believe in the pressure of it's not meaning something unless it's been around a long time. And I say that because just some people aren't made that way. I don't mind I don't mind attention deficit disorder. I don't mind if you move from project to project. And some other people, one thing I would call for us to be more transparent about our own economic needs of people. I don't think you have to be guilty that you actually need the money to go from project to project if that's the case. You can just say that. No one's going to judge. Maybe some people will judge you. But just to say, maybe that's an economy. The other thing I'll say too is, there are other forms of temporalities built into things. So for example, the Queen's Museum, when Tanya partnered with Creative Time and Queen's Museum, we as organizations have different temporalities. We only do projects for maybe 1 year. Whereas Queen's Museum, max. Whereas Queen's Museum does, they're in the neighborhood. They will be around. They have a very different relationship to a long-term endeavor. They don't have any plans to disappear ever. So their institutional temporalities are different. And sometimes artists can think about organizational partners that have different temporal structures to work with.
But also one important thing, that's the last thing I want to say, is that it's important for the institutions to understand they have to pay a salary to artists to do this work.
Yes.
Because part of the strongest struggle I had in the immigrant movement is at one point, I had to be working like crazy everywhere. Like all my fees immediately went up double because I had to do all these things that I didn't want to do. in order to pay people who were working in the movement, because I had to pay them. I could not say do it for free anymore. I could not have the face for this. So I think it's important that if these projects are being made, to be honest. The artist is not going to say like I need 10 years, so I live without work for 10 years. This project with my salary, but also the institution need to understand that it's important that the artist can concentrate, because maybe sometimes one thing you can do in 1 year if you don't have the money.
Yeah.
It takes you 3 because you have to work in other things
and of course the institutions are dependent on getting their money, and they need to prove results all the time, so it's like a vicious circle.
But you know,
but
but
I
it's
wanted to ask
important to
Anna.
show that artists need to be supported.
Yes.
Artists don't work. Artists do their work and they need the salary.
I couldn't agree more.
Sorry.
Okay, so we talked about the project economy and attention economy. We talked about Gothenburg, that is very much known as an event-based town. That's what it prides itself on also. How did you think around that when you were staging your massive project? I think it was 14 works over a number of weeks.
So that's one of the things that I really want to analyze more onto the future, and also to bear in mind that the project was realized due to this big donation, or whatever you call it, from Postkolotteriet that came very late. The decision was made in April, and we were supposed to realize the project already in August. And of course, I had some other public funding before, but it was too little to actually know that you could realize something. So, having to build a long-term collaborations with artists and set off artistic productions, not knowing if you can actually realize them in the end. That was one of my main challenges, which didn't really allow any for us in the project to even anticipate or to work against or towards or with or whatever this event Gothenburg in the way I would like it to be. Because of course there's always a risk of doing the same thing as you're criticizing, basically, when you're doing this short-term event-based situations. Now, I do believe that most of the projects within the project as a whole actually managed to work really well with that. But this is something, obviously, that I would prefer to do. I would prefer to be able to work more long-term, if possible, and not. And also, I think it's very important to see that, to me, this counterpart project is not so much about only the exhibition as the end. It's actually an initiator of much larger processes and productions that will continue, and to be able to have a thematic or an idea that can be processed throughout different periods and different kind of shapes. So even if the audience wouldn't see something visible, we've still created, like for instance, we've talked about continuation of this project, of course, which is very complex, and the little things we saw today is just, showing little circles of a much larger platform that non-existent set is creating for undocumented, notion of not having the right papers in order as to be treated as a human being in this country. So to me, it was a compromise, definitely.
Maybe it's also possible to produce hybrid. It's so fun to speak it out loud, but like there's other institutions that don't think like projects. For example, a sanitation department works on a long-term project.
They never finish.
Or a per-project basis. Which is to say, there's a lot of structures in society work on long-term projects, and their money isn't determined by projects. And I think the language of the way we're doing art right now in terms of alternative institution building is you can borrow the language as well as the funding streams from these spaces as well. We rely on this word art for what? If it's not paying the bills and your language is more robust than art, maybe you can just let that go for a little bit and become a really interesting sanitation department. Or I'm just saying.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. And also, I'll tell you this, because the arts are so robust in terms of what it can do for society, at least in the United States, if you get money from housing and urban development, that's real money, right? Real money. The military, that's real money. Arts, that's fake money. So just to say, like, there is an advantage to producing counter institutions. We're not even counter. Right? This word's even wrong. We are just a better idea. Although, you gotta know about sanitation. Just if you're gonna do that one. But just to say, you know what I mean? There's other structures of society that we could mimic. And maybe the art languages are problems to some degree.
We have time for one more question. Yes.
I was thinking in terms of the question that you posed on backfiring, because I think a lot of artists tend to take on a responsibility as though the intention of doing something positive, like in a community, doesn't match the outcome or the result. And so the direction of criticism isn't like, pointed in the right direction. It's turned towards the artists who are like, creating this culture. We create this culture around each other to do socially engaged art, and then there is a little bit of funding for it, and then you satisfy this to a certain degree. But then, the interest from big money is usually something entirely different, maybe not in the content at all itself, but in plans that are already made for a city to promote, its, to market itself. And then you do become a pawn, in a way, inside of this scheme. And then you see, perhaps, that you didn't have the energy to stay or something, and then class realities of poor populations are precisely the same after you left this project, and you just feel this like awfulness as an artist, because you're doing all these things that are not really changing economic structures for people. In reality, they become like holding hand art. You're there for a moment and you give an impression of doing something graceful, and the art institution that is located there, they're really happy about it because that satisfies everything that they were supposed to do. And I don't even think that they are the culprit, like these institutions, like when these things happen. But it does seem to me that sometimes, like the investment that comes from these artists or the institutions could be, maybe similar to this sanitation, proposal that you had here. I think that, like in a way, there's a lot of skills within the art world that are, if they're always placed inside of the art world, then they're always going to end up maybe not backfiring so much that it like you made shit worse in this community, but backfiring on yourself and the whole image of what you were even able to achieve in terms of the expectations that you had on yourself, or that you were given inside of your education or inside of the art economy life off of these, maybe for a moment, etc. So it's not even a good solution in those terms. So I'm just thinking like this, the proposition that could, go from artist to artist instead could be to use the skills that you do have and that you did develop, the experiences that you did get within the type of experiments that you tried, into like things that actually maybe never even needed to be presented within the art world and didn't need that economy, because maybe that's just going to be this like self-circulating type of activity. So it's like actually maybe artists telling each other to work politically, maybe in a way that nobody's prepared for, but that doesn't need to be explained inside of the art economy, and if you know what I mean.
So more ways of sharing knowledge and experiences, and
actually doing things that are like political and maybe like identifying that capital has this stronghold, and it's not going to like change the makeup of the poverty is not going to be changed by your art project, so like really identifying the fact that these unfair structures are something that we could be a veritable army against, in terms of organizing for things that are maybe not just to satisfy this career idea, which isn't going to work anyways, because we're not going to make making it. Which isn't really a question, sorry, but you know how it is.
Thank you.
Call to arms.
Okay, on that call to arms, I think we have to end the evening. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you so much.